Record on this computer, and we're recording. All right. Oh, of course, the Read AI wanted to interrupt me. All right, it's going to interrupt it now, though, and I can remove it.
Nice.
Done. I think I've had like 3 podcast episodes now kind of start off with like the Read AI or some sort of like AI conversation where the AI just tries to join the meeting like unintentionally. And I literally don't even have the subscription anymore. It still wants to join my meeting. So I'm not sure what to do.
You can't escape it, man.
Exactly. It's a downfall of AI. But okay, everyone, we are on episode 21 of the Conquer the Mind podcast. If you don't know, you should know now. If you can conquer your mind, you can conquer anything in this world. And we're going to really dive into JD's background. I was just kind of saying we got JD squared on the podcast today. So, JD is a vice president of franchise development and technology at a franchise called Rush Bowls. Very excited to dive into JD's background. We were kind of just joking around. The joke is that people fall into franchising or they have family in franchising. I have family in franchising, and JD fell into franchising. Once you're in franchising, you really never go back. So the JDs are in franchising for good. So JD, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. It's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So, just a quick background on JD for anyone that doesn't know. He actually started his career at Rush Bowls as literally an hourly employee at the store when he was just 20 years old. So, very exciting to kind of dive into that background. At the time, he was actually pursuing a career in the music industry, similar to somewhat of my background as well, which is also interesting. So, he was in the music industry. And he really never lost touch with the CEO of Rush Bowls, even when he was kind of going a different path. So once Rush Bowls kind of was forming a corporate team, they started franchising. They started franchising actually in 2016, and JD eventually joined Rush Bowls later on to do what he is in his current role now. So JD, I'm excited to have you on, kind of dive into someone that's literally seen Rush Bowls kind of from the ground up to the massive empire that it really has become today. So I think I'd like to start off the podcast for a lot of people. Sometimes it starts off with someone that's been in the industry for like 30, 40 years. And I ask them about like high school days and they kind of just laugh at me because they just don't necessarily remember it as much. But I think it's helpful for a lot of people from that high school to college progression, then kind of college afterwards. Like I think a lot of people are just very lost in life, trying to figure out what their passion is. And it sounds like you kind of found your passion, and then you're trying to kind of balance a couple different things. So I'd love to dive into kind of your background, kind of from high school transitioning into college. I understand you went to UC Boulder, a very big university. So can you kind of walk us through that experience?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to. So, I mean, taking it all the way back to high school, like you said, wasn't really sure of, what my path was going to be. I always was really into music, being a hobbyist musician myself, but, always having that kind of business mindset at the same time. I was the kid selling Monster Energy drinks out of his locker, in middle school, high school. So kind of always had that mentality. I went to University of Colorado Boulder, started in the business school, started
Mhm.
off finance, ended up switching to operations. But really during my freshman year of college, I still was really wanting to break into the music industry.
Mhm.
Very tough industry to get into. I had no idea how to approach it, but ended up meeting someone that was a music producer at the time, had some great music, wanted to play shows, didn't know how to do it. So, being 18 years old, we're like, let's figure this out. I'll be your manager. Let's make it work. I ended up getting him some small shows, started a record label at the time called Keeping It Real Records with a couple of buddies, and was just doing like DIY, house parties. The fraternities would hire us. The ski team at the college would hire us. So really just a fun thing for us.
Mhm.
I was going to business school, but still didn't know what I was going to do with that degree at the time. I just knew music was the focus. So I ended up, funny enough, just needed a part-time job. I think this was sophomore year of college. I
Mhm.
ended up finding Rush Bowls. It was the only location. It was a Craigslist ad just for a part-time job at a
Oh,
smoothie shop.
wow.
Didn't think much beyond that. Just needed some extra money being a college student. But started working there, started getting really close with the founder and CEO, Andrew Podalev.
Mm,
Worked there for a couple of years while still pursuing music, on the side. And at that time, I had no thoughts in my mind that Rush Bowls would be a career for me. This was just, as I said, just a part-time job, a stepping stone into music. But ended up getting a job in the music industry, doing talent buying for a couple of the theaters in Boulder, the Fox Theater, Boulder Theater, some historic venues out there. But also, I always kept in touch with Andrew, the founder and CEO, and he had mentioned that, hey, we were thinking about starting franchising. This was back, 2015 when things were starting to happen there. 2016, they actually launched franchising, and I ended up hitting him up and say, hey, what's going on these days? I'm working in music. I'm not making any money in music. It's tough. What are you up to? And
mm,
he was happy to take me back. And I joined the corporate team at that point as an administrative assistant, I believe was my first role. So
mm.
I was started to learn, the details on franchise agreements, the FDD. I was
Yeah.
That time we were scanning them in by hand and then sending them out by mail and having people sign them. So
Yeah.
started getting knowledge there, and that's kind of what kick-started my career at Rush Bowls. And there's a lot of hats over the years. I was on the training team, so I was flying out, opening stores, operational. Technology was also a passion of mine. That kind of goes hand in hand with the music. It's all electricity at the end of the day, so I was pretty familiar with that. Uh, Ended up being the guy with head of technology at one point. I still have that role today. It's still something I'm involved in. But yeah, throughout the years, wore those different hats. Ended up in this development role for the past couple of years. I had a mentor named Philip who really taught me the ropes. A veteran franchise guy, used to do development for Quiznos, F45.
That's
He
awesome.
was he was a great guy. Such a character. I knew he was planning to retire at some point, and the position would be mine at one day. But unfortunately, he ended up having a couple of strokes and passing away a couple of years ago, which
Mm,
was really, hit us hard. Andrew and myself were pretty close with him. And
mm,
Rush Bowls was really his life, at the end of his life too. So I
yeah.
kind of got thrown into the role sooner than I imagined. Not how I was thinking it was going to go, but really
Mm,
kind of carrying on, Philip's honor and what I do today.
huh. That's all really powerful. I love kind of your whole background there, starting from college, literally like learning the whole ropes of the business, and a little like sidetrack before I want to dive into kind of the next question. But I think it's pretty interesting, like as candidates kind of evaluating different franchise opportunities, just as much as, candidates are evaluating the brand and you're evaluating the candidate, they're looking at the franchise developer and kind of their tie to the brand, and are they just playing like leapfrog from brand to brand and don't necessarily have that strong tie to the brand? But it's very clear that, Rush Bowls actually has that personal connection to you. You have a personal connection to the CEO, the founder. You've literally learned the business from the ground up. So when someone's trying to learn the business as a potential franchisee, it's good to take advice from someone that's actually lived, breathed, done it all before. So I think that's all really powerful, JD. I appreciate you kind of dropping all of that background as well. And one thing you mentioned, kind of, you were a finance kind of in college, and so was I, kind of the finance degree. I think a lot of us, for me personally, no one had ever gone the finance route. It's kind of like that's where the money is. You got to at least kind of try the finance route. You get a cozy 9 to 5. It's made out to believe. Then you get like a nice sum of money. You get a nice 401k and benefits. So I'm curious, as someone that similar to me went kind of the finance route, but then you mentioned selling Monster Energy, and sounds like you kind of had like that natural born entrepreneur and you're trying to find ways to make money, trying to find ways to make life more convenient for other people to provide that value. I'm curious, like what was going through like your mind in college? why are you even like thinking like I got to sell Monster Energy or whatever it may be, rather than kind of just I'm going to study for my exams, I'm going to get that 9 to 5 after. What was that mindset like?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I grew up in a very fortunate area. I wasn't struggling by any means, but I still was wanting to. I had that just drive to provide a product. I think my parents were very business focused, big inspiration to me of just
Mm,
working hard, and knowing that it's not always a given. Even though I did grow up in a blessed situation, it's not
yeah.
it's not the case for everyone. I think
Mm,
that somewhat instilled into me that drive just to try things out. I thought it was just kind of fun. I make a couple bucks, buy myself lunch. It wasn't, like do or die with those kind of situations. But that really that kind of inspired me to go into business in the college realm. I started with finance for the first couple of years. Once
yeah.
we started getting into deep equations with, derivative trading and all that, I was like, I don't know if this is the route I want to go. And that's when I switched to operations management and finish off my degree that way. Because I think deep down I am more of an operator, like learning the efficiencies of a business, you know, how to solve problems and make things work out. And that kind of made my switch to operations, which I think was very valuable now, still being in somewhat of an operations role today with Rush Bowls.
No, that's really interesting. And I think very similar to you, I grew up in a very privileged background as well. And, my mindset, I actually have like a chain that I wear and it says, we have to have the mentality that we have to work for everything we're going to get. Because even if you are super privileged, if you don't take advantage of the opportunities, which most people don't do, you end up in that same situation. That's why that story, second, third generational wealth just totally disappears because the work ethic disappears. People don't take advantage of those opportunities. And I always find it so fascinating. Like most of my mentors and the people that I look up to, they're always like that first generational wealth person, the person that really made it happen. There's not a lot of people that are that second generation continue to take it to that next level, in my opinion. So I think that's really interesting. I love that you brought in that work ethic and you saw the opportunity and you made it happen. So I think that's really fascinating. And going back to like you found out kind of you wanted to be in operations, I find that pretty interesting where a lot of people they're either like I think it's either like business development kind of sales or like kind of extra introverted more research type role. How did you kind of figure out like you like the operational system? I feel like that's something someone like much older kind of figures out like I like operational type things. I'm curious how at like a young age why you were like I like the operational side of the business.
Sure. Honestly, at the time, my choices were, finance, accounting, operations, or marketing. I tried the finance thing. I knew I didn't want to do accounting.
Hmm.
Uh, Marketing, I wasn't too into. So I really sat down and thought, I guess the operations is really what's, interesting to me. And I remember my earliest introduction even to franchising when I was 16, I worked at a Burger King, just flipping
Wow.
burgers, my first job. But I thought even seeing how that store operated, very well run store was super interesting to me, even at a young age. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of value in someone myself taking it a bit more seriously than, hey, this is just my gas money job, like
Hmm.
really diving into what's going on behind the scenes to actually keep the store running. And
Yeah.
I think that really extended to my college days and led to my decision to ultimately be an operations guy.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I know I always kind of read about, the way you do like the small things is how you end up doing the big things. And I think similar to like being a business owner, at least growing up for me, it's always kind of like all of a sudden you snap your fingers and then you can be a business owner all of a sudden. But it's about kind of acquiring all these different skills. And, to be a business owner, there's so few because that are able to start that business because, they don't take those small things as seriously. Very few people, I think, would be flipping burgers and actually trying to implement that business model and say, what are those systems? What are those operational procedures? So I think anyone that's trying to figure out their passion, their why, just take the small things seriously. And then, you never know when you're going to flip that next door, that next opportunity. So I think that's really interesting. And going into kind of a little bit about keeping it real records,
Yeah.
so it's kind of similar to franchising for a little bit in terms of like the marketing aspect, where if you're a new franchisee, you're trying to build the brand recognition, you're trying to build some credibility in your market. And I know you had like a couple sold out shows. So I'm kind of curious, what was like the marketing aspect like? And you're literally like kind of doing it all by yourself. What was like that journey experience like? Were there any kind of major lessons you're learning during this time?
Yeah, I think a big lesson I learned that we still apply even opening Rush Bowl stores today, but the old school, pounding the ground, pounding the pavement type of marketing, it still works. We
Mhm.
were making posters, handbills of our flyers for the shows and handing them out to people on the streets, on campus. Just talking it up with people was huge. We
Mhm.
did a little bit of social media at the time, but we didn't have a big following, so it was a lot of word of mouth, working with some up and coming artists that were starting to get some traction in the college scene, but were still pretty underground. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it was just getting out there, talking to people. And I think back to the early days of Rush Bowls, we have 52 stores now, but back when we had 2, 3 stores, we were breaking into markets that we had no brand recognition at all. So the
Mhm.
franchisees, we gave them the game plan, but the ones that would go out, partnering with the businesses, literally pounding that pavement, and that was huge for their growth. That just really had them taken off from day one.
Mhm. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Just I don't know, just the music industry is just such a tough industry. So like to be able to kind of start that by yourself at a young age, I think is just very impressive. I'm sure there's kind of like a lot of different lessons. I know you're bringing in like brand recognition, merchandise, doing all these different things to kind of help these artists out, which I think is very interesting. I like the local kind of boots on the floor kind of type marketing, just flyers, word of mouth, because a lot of times stuff gets lost in translation on the internet. Everyone's seeing ads left and right. It can be overwhelming trying to figure out, what's actually real, what you actually relate to. So I think that's just a really interesting lesson. And kind of,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah, of course. And I know I want to dive into like you being an entrepreneur a little bit more. You mentioned kind of your parents. Were they entrepreneurs? What was kind of like their background? Was there something that kind of like got into your head that you wanted to be in business, or what was that kind of element like?
Sure. My dad, historically growing up, was a stockbroker,
Okay.
and my mom was a teacher.
Hmm.
So, I'd say more of a traditional type of business setup, not owning his own business, but he was a really good testament of just really working hard and getting really good at what he did, and then sticking with that company for a long time. He now works at Chase Bank in their wealth management sector. His company he worked for, Scott Trade, ended up getting bought out by TD Ameritrade. So he had to make a pivot there.
Hmm.
So the entrepreneurial part, I would say, didn't necessarily come from them. I saw the traditional route he was in, and I loved business, but I wanted to have somewhat more control, I think. So I was interested in building something from the ground up and
Yeah.
knowing that it's a risk, knowing there's no guarantee. But that was always interesting to me of like, let's just go for it. There's a lot of people I think were like, hey, we'd love to start a record label or do these things, but it's scary and they don't do it. So we just took the jump and went for it. We learned a lot, as young kids. We learned the value of reading the contracts you're agreeing to. We worked with some venues that, maybe try to take advantage of us as being
Hmm.
uneducated on the industry. So got into some contracts we maybe didn't like, ended up getting out of them. So a lot of learning lessons came along with that too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, it's always just like you never know what that step 5, that step 7, that step 100 is going to look like, but you just acquire all these different skills and it leads to that next opportunity. So I think it's really interesting, just a really interesting background because that industry is just, it's such a big industry. I always feel like the artists in the industry have been at the top of the industry for so many years. It's so hard to kind of break through that to get that brand recognition. And it's very similar to you want to start your own business or you want to get into franchising. You mentioned looking at the contracts. If you're trying to start a business by yourself, you're getting taken advantage left and right by, all these different vendors, whether it's the product, the sales, the marketing, the legal. So there's so many different elements between, and I think there's just a lot of similarities between the entertainment industry and then franchising as well. So I think that's pretty interesting. So kind of starting to dive into franchising now. So you kind of decided you wanted to join Rush Bowls. can you kind of walk us through like that decision-making process? Was it about like franchising, or what was it about Rush Bowls that, you wanted to kind of be a part of that at this point?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So making that connection in my early college days, working at the store, I loved the brand. I loved our CEO. He's a really good guy. We started getting close, and it was something that I could fully get behind. Providing healthy food to people is something
Mhm.
I could really agree with and be, happy to share that with people.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I was working in the music industry full time, I was living in Boulder, and I was like, I can't pay my rent anymore. And that kind of was the kicker. Boulder is not cheap to live in. And
Yeah.
that's what honestly kicked me to give Andrew a call. I was like, man, I need to figure something out. And it really ended up working out. I
Mhm.
I was planning to go back and, like I said, just an operations role, admin assistant.
Mhm.
Andrew saw within me the potential to be more of in the development space and sales space.
Mhm.
And it ended up being a great fit for me. I didn't think that was going to be my route, but I've
Mhm.
always really liked talking to people, forming relationships, and I had the knowledge of the business already there from working in the store. So that
Mhm.
gave me a huge advantage rather than trying to come into a new brand and learn it all as a developer. I
Yeah.
had that base knowledge already there. And now he's like, okay, now go sell it to people. And I was like, well, the base knowledge is already there. So I can work on that.
Yeah, I would think it would be a lot easier to sell something when you actually have that passion. You were kind of born with it. You relate to it. You literally saw it from the ground up. So I think, yeah, it's just a really good lesson. And I'd be curious, as someone that kind of, fell into franchising. For a lot of people, everyone falls into franchising, then, they really never leave franchising. What was it about franchising like that caught like your initial reaction where when you first got involved in franchising? How did you know like this is for me? I enjoy doing this.
I love seeing the process being, established, always being improved upon, but giving a platform for people that wanted to take that jump into business ownership in just a much more digestible way.
Mm,
That's one of my favorite things about my current role is, having that first call with someone and hearing, man, I've been stuck in this job for 20 years. It's not really fulfilling. I don't know what to do. I'm scared to make a change. And definitely starting a business from scratch is a huge undertaking, a huge risk.
mm,
But franchising really gives that in between of, hey, there's a game plan here, there's a proven
yeah.
track record. You still can take control of your life and join the franchise. So I love seeing that progression of that first call where they're just not happy with their lives till, hey, now we've got 2, 3 stores open, and now I left this other job and I'm doing Rush Bowls
Yeah.
full time. I think that's such a cool progression to see.
Yeah, it really is so powerful. And I always kind of relate kind of my why statement to these three things, really: the financial freedom, the lifestyle freedom, and then impact, having that impact on other people. And, just evaluating all the different opportunities out there. I just don't see anything else outside of franchising that provides a better opportunity. And as Rob Flanagan alluded to on a recent episode, it provides that opportunity to the average American. You don't need to be born into some privileged family. Don't need to have all these different skills. You don't need, Harvard or Cornell degree. It's literally just, are you someone in your current position that wants more for yourself, your family? You want to take your life to that next level. You want to have an impact on other people. I think it's just so powerful where you can combine all these different elements and, not be trapped in that corporate 9 to 5 role, looking at a computer 10 hours a day or just making sales calls for 12 hours a day. You're doing all these different things. And once you are a business owner, they kind of allude to also like you could be dropped anywhere in the country and like you just have all these skills to be successful. So I think that's just a really powerful lesson. So diving into Rush Bowls now, you're the franchise developer. You also work on their technology. Can you walk someone who knows nothing about Rush Bowls? How is revenue derived at Rush Bowls? What is Rush Bowls for someone that has no idea and living under a rock, has no idea what acai and superfoods are? Could you kind of dive us through all of that?
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, at the basis of it, Rush Bowls is a small scale, simple restaurant concept serving blended fruit bowls and smoothies. So, full meals in a bowl. Our product is really dedicated to raw ingredients, no preservatives, no added sugars, things of that nature. And we really saw the need. There's so many communities where if you want a convenient meal, it's not going to be healthy at the end of the day. So it's really underserved and still is in a lot of these communities. And that was a space that we were looking to fill.
Hmm.
For our franchisees, it really is a good gateway into the food industry because it is small scale. We're 1,000 square foot spaces. We really don't have any food waste spoilage because most of the product is frozen. So
Yeah.
it's a good entryway where you're not looking to, have a full scale restaurant that's going to have holding temperatures and 30 employees on shift at one time. And
Hmm.
that's really where the foundation was founded on just simplicity and easy to operate. So most of our operators, they never worked in the food industry before, but
Hmm.
they're picking it up, they're stepping in and really crushing it.
Oh, that's incredible. And franchise is all about building the systems, the processes, like we said, to just make it as simple as possible so that you don't need some guy with an MBA to replicate the wheel. It's literally just we have the processes, the systems for you to replicate that in your market. So I think that's really powerful. And can you walk someone through? Is it like 3 meals a day at Rush Bowls? You can get breakfast, lunch, dinner. What's kind of that outlook look like? Is there most revenue derived at a certain time of the day?
Sure. Yeah, so our stores are open usually about 7 or 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. at night, depending on the market. They might be a little bit later. We do a big breakfast rush, and then lunchtime across the board is our busiest time of day. You know, being positioned as a full meal rather than a snack or a treat or something like that really helps with the lack of seasonality here. Even though it's a frozen product, people think, hey, maybe people don't eat it that much in the winter, but if
Yeah.
people are looking for a healthy meal and it's January as it is now, they're still coming to us. It doesn't matter if it's cold
Huh.
outside. Lunchtime, busiest time of day by far, but then a big pop for the after gym crowd. People going to work out after work, then they'll stop in, get their super protein smoothie and be on their way.
Oh, that's super interesting. And kind of, I like kind of using the gym, using that. And that's a good point as well. Even in a cold kind of temperature, it's not necessarily affecting the business. When we're looking at really the trends and kind of the way of the future, people are very health conscious. I think, especially out of 2020, I think people very more even health conscious since that. But kind of diving into that, can you talk about kind of like just the trends you kind of mentioned with all these like no preservatives? I feel like this is like a huge thing. And I know even some ingredients that are in the US are like banned in other countries. So can you kind of talk about like the demographics of like healthy eating? Like where did all of these kind of like come from? I feel like, it really came like fast and furious where all of a sudden people are paying attention more to this stuff.
Oh, 100%. And that's the hard part too. Like you said, in the US, you don't know if something even is certified organic. Is it even real at the end of the day? Like it's hard to tell. So that's why for us, we just want to have very straightforward, simple ingredients. It's just frozen fruit at the end of the day, nothing added to it, frozen fruit and vegetables.
Mm,
These days we're seeing a lot of people, tracking their macros, like really, really in tune with what they're putting into their bodies. For
mm,
us, all of our products are fully customizable. So you can get really granular if you want to. We have a franchisee big in the bodybuilding community down in Florida, and
mm,
that whole community, they're coming in and making these little tweaks to the smoothies or whatever, so they're hitting their macros exactly how they want to. The trend towards healthy eating has been happening for a while, of course, but as you mentioned, after 2020, after COVID happened, we
mm.
really saw a big change in our demographic. It used to be, for the most part, ages 15 to 35, so a bit younger, people eating healthy.
Yeah.
But after 2020, we're started seeing all ages, all
Mm,
backgrounds started coming into our stores. They were really starting to think about, hey, I got to pay attention to what I'm putting into my body and be healthy now. So,
huh.
horrible event, of course, business wise for us was a positive, to be honest with you.
Huh. That's fascinating. That's interesting because I know you started franchising in 2016 and you're still growing through COVID, which just goes to show the strength of the systems and the processes. I'd be curious, do you guys use like Uber Eats, DoorDash? Is that part of the revenue model at all?
It is, yeah. We're listed on all those major platforms.
Okay.
We also partner with a company called Olo that allows us to offer delivery orders through our native channels, through our mobile app, online ordering site. And
Huh.
then also catering is a big revenue stream for us. So going to local sporting events, even farmers markets, law offices, hospitals, that's a big piece for us. We have stores, multiple stores that cater for professional sports teams as well.
Oh,
The
wow.
nutritionists, especially when they're traveling to go, play an away game, that nutritionist is looking for, hey, how can I get my team something healthy that we know what's in it? So
Hmm.
they'll come to town, they'll give us a call and be like, hey, we need 100 bowls over here in a few hours. We got the whole team ready. So that's a big opportunity as well.
Huh, that's really powerful. And kind of relating to the sports teams that you mentioned, a lot of times I hear from candidates on the phone, kind of like the national relationships that are in place or forms of kind of lead generation. Is that something that you guys have in place, these forms of like national relationships?
We do, yeah. We have a partnership with Orange Theory Fitness. We have a
Oh,
couple others in the works that I can't talk about yet until they're live. The sports teams, interestingly enough, that's been kind of self-fulfilling, especially with the colleges. We had one store do a volleyball team at a college, and then they started traveling around, and now they're looking for rush bowls in every city. They're telling the basketball coach, "Hey, have you heard of these guys? You guys got to check them out when you're in town."
yeah.
And that's just kind of spread organically from our franchisees, to be honest.
Huh.
Being in the cities, talking it up, showing that it's an option, and these nutritionists getting a hold of them.
That's so fascinating. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people on that volleyball team end up opening up a Rush Bowls in 5, 10 years or something like that.
Right?
That's so fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you guys have like a lot of Rush Bowls that are in like college towns, for example, and are very kind of built in like a strictly college town demographic?
We do have a handful. So the brand was really born at University of Colorado. We have
Okay.
a handful of college campus stores. I mean, that demographic is naturally attracted to this type of product, but we have expanded beyond that. We have, dense urban stores, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Denver, et cetera, where it's not college focused. It's more density, foot traffic surrounding businesses. But
Huh.
honestly, these days, most of our stores are more suburban located, and we
Hmm.
like to be near, high schools are great for us. That demographic is perfect.
Hmm.
Any gyms, fitness centers, of course, like to be near. So it really has expanded beyond just the college strategy, but it still lives on to this day.
No, that's awesome. It's interesting, just putting it in a college town, that market. But as you alluded to, it's really people of all ages, all genders that are really into this nowadays and have been for the last couple of years and just continue that trend. And I think more and more people just continue to get on the health wave, hopefully, sooner rather than later. Um,
Right?
I'd be curious a little bit about like the model in terms of like when customers are going into the store. Is it more kind of like a Starbucks type model where like you want people to kind of hang out in the store, kind of like do work in the store, eat their bowl, or is it kind of like in and out type setting?
Our model is more of a grab and go focused.
Okay.
So pretty small locations. We do have some seating, people are welcome to sit and eat if they want, of course, but what we're seeing is most people are grabbing these when they're on the go, in a rush, no pun intended, but they're on their way to work, they're hitting the gym, they're coming by us. So honestly, depending on the location, 30 to 60% of our business is either pickup, takeout, or delivery. So they're not sitting in the stores very much.
So it is called Rush Bowls for a reason.
Right? Exactly.
That's incredible. I love that. That's too funny. And you alluded to Andrew kind of earlier on the episode and kind of him being a strong reason why you wanted to join Rush Bowls. And I think as a potential candidate, one of the big things you want to evaluate is that CEO, that founder, how hands-on are they? How tied are they to the franchise? Can you kind of talk about what Andrew does for Rush Bowls and kind of his tie to the franchise?
Yeah, 100%. So he came from a finance background, derivative trader on Wall Street, and really in the early 2000s was tired of that. 9/11 was a big factor for him wanting to get out of New York City, and he
Hmm.
just wanted to start something that at the time he had no knowledge about. So he truly built it from the ground up, learned it every step of the way, and I think that added a lot of value as in the early days, he self-admittedly didn't know what he was doing. And of course, these days now he's learned so many lessons, but he's really good at putting the right people in place and letting them do their job. And I think that's a really important factor for a CEO. Him seeing the nature of myself to be put in a sales position, and that making a lot of sense even before I might have seen it. You know,
Mhm.
our CMO currently was one of his very first managers back in 2004, 2005 when he first opened the store. So there's a lot of loyalty to the brand, you know, within our corporate team and even on a store level too. But Andrew's done a really good job at, you know, keeping that loyalty alive and keeping it a place where people are passionate about it and they want to keep working here.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, that's what, strong leaders do. They motivate, they inspire people, and they create this strong culture of very like-minded people. And I think it's really powerful. I'd be curious. I know you started franchising in 2004, or no, excuse me, the business started in 2004 and started franchising in 2016. Can you kind of walk us through kind of like that 12-year gap? I'm kind of always curious, some franchises, they start the business, then they're franchising 1 year later. And then some really kind of wait that 5, 10 years, let the operations, the systems kind of play out. Can you kind of walk us through that decision-making process to, start franchising in 2016?
Yeah, for sure. Because yeah, it's been 12 years, you know, it was just that one store. And I think for a long time, he wasn't thinking about franchising, wasn't really considering it. He had met someone in Boulder who was a franchisee within a fast food restaurant system, owned a couple hundred stores. And I
Mhm.
think that really got the wheels turning for him of, okay, I think this could be scalable. You know, the model was already simple. It was already kind of built to be scaled.
Yeah.
And, you know, hearing this colleague talk about, you know, we do fast food restaurants that are so much more complicated than this. You should really look into franchising Rush Bowls.
Mhm.
And made the jump to do it. You know, that was a big learning curve for everyone involved at the time. You know, that was brand new to the whole corporate team, but really came together, learned a lot in those early days. And I think it was a great move. Now we have, you know, stores in 22 states with franchisees happy to be giving people some healthy meals, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so powerful. And you can't like continue to grow as a franchise without having strong validation, having franchise owners that not only are making money, because sometimes that's not enough, they also have to be happy. And those things can be very different in different systems. So it goes to show, it has strong validation. They continue to award franchises, at a responsible rate, which is really powerful. And you alluded to, you don't need to be have that restaurant background owner to be a franchise owner of Rush Bowls. Could you kind of walk us through, with restaurants, sometimes there's a lot of moving parts. Is there like a kitchen? Are there ingredients? Kind of what is like needed to kind of get started? You mentioned not a ton of spoilage. What does that look like?
Sure. So the bulk of our ingredients is frozen fruit. So our
Okay.
stores feature a walk-in freezer. That's kind of the biggest piece of equipment we have in there. You can kind of see my background. We got a couple juice machines, the blenders, of course, but it's all very simple since mostly everything is frozen. You know,
Hmm.
that's not spoiling. We offer some fresh fruit topping options, of course, but you know, say the fresh bananas are going to go bad in a couple of days, just chop them up, throw them in the freezer. So it
Hmm.
makes managing it a lot easier in that regard. And then we're blending it all right there on site. So the employees are putting in the milk or juice, the frozen fruit, throwing it on the blender, and then putting those toppings on there. You know, nice and easy to learn. I will never lose that skill of blending the perfect bowl after doing it for years. That's for sure. But I think that's a big factor of being an easily attainable food industry kind of concept. For us, you know, with a franchisee, we're more so looking for the team building. You know, are you going to manage this team of employees? Are you going to motivate them, create that kind of subculture within your store? And I
Hmm.
think I get a lot of people coming from the corporate world. They're like, yeah, I've built, you know, corporate teams. I've never done it in a restaurant, but at the end of the day, it's a similar type of mentality.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Definitely not. I'm kind of curious, back when you were literally just an hourly worker, how often were you eating like Rush Bowls, like smoothies? How how often were you eating that?
Though at least every shift and then plus some. You know, I was always getting my free bowl during my shift, coming in my off periods. And these days I still eat them all the time. I haven't gotten sick of them, that's for sure.
That's too funny. I'm just going back to my high school days where I was an hourly worker at a music circus and I was literally bagging popcorn, and the amount of popcorn I ate for that summer was just not a healthy amount. So I wish I could have been working on rush bowls back then, it would have been a lot better for my health.
Hey, you got to take the perks, whatever they are.
Yeah, exactly. Even though it may take a couple years off my life, it did taste good.
Right?
But I would be curious, kind of, we mentioned some are in kind of college towns, but it really could be really anywhere. Sometimes, you're thinking about starting your own business or getting into a franchise. A lot of times I hear from candidates, first off, people, there's a lot of, people don't necessarily understand the franchising world or really what goes into a business to make it a successful franchise. There's a lot of different elements, but part of it is the real estate selection and kind of figuring out what that market would look like. And for yourself, you're not going to award a territory to someone in a market that is just not scalable. It can't grow. And I think candidates, that's a big misconception. Like, we're here to set you up for success. We want to put you in a market where people are gonna want to use that business. For a franchise, the franchise fee is really nothing. It's really about that 5-10 year long-term vision. So can you walk us through what goes into finding real estate selection? What's that behind the scenes kind of look like?
Sure. Yeah, we do work with a national real estate company that's been a great help for our franchisees. So running data and demographics on locations, helping them through the whole lease negotiation process as well. Because to your point, a lot of these candidates, it's their first time looking at commercial real estate. It can be daunting. You don't know, how am I going to negotiate this lease? What am I even looking for at the end of the day? So that's been a big help. Kind of the things I mentioned, either a college campus, dense urban area, or located near those gyms, fitness centers. Those are great things for us. Demographics wise, we go across the board, but we're looking for, decent income in an area. At the end of the day, it's a health food product. We want to make sure people are, affluent enough to want this and to afford it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think some people come in and, they're worried, hey, this market might not work out. But like you said, if it wasn't going to work out, we would just not award it, because for us, even more so than a lot of brands, something different. We don't make any money on our supply chain like a lot of franchisors do. So that royalty is really what we need. So we need our stores to be successful for us to be successful. We're really on the same team here with the franchisees. So, that real estate piece is really important to us just as much as the franchisee, I would say.
That's super interesting. Is that something when like someone is kind of interested in rush bowls and they're going through the process? Is that something where like they'll get on, like they'll see like the screen and like the mapping territories that you guys are looking at so that they can get a better picture of what that market looks like?
Yeah, 100%. Like to get some data from our real estate team, say, hey, this is the city you live in. These are some of these different pockets and how they look demographically and where we might be interested in.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's super helpful for people just thinking about franchising. Like, you're literally going to be honest on a Zoom like we are today. JD is going to share his screen and literally show you that market you're looking at, what the potential demographics look like. So I think it's really powerful that you also have that relationship with the realtor company that is giving you these real, boots on the ground demographics of the market. So I think that's really powerful. So someone that is kind of thinking about franchising, maybe rush bowls, they're thinking about business ownership. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about the ideal candidate at rush bowls, or at least the most successful, like the top 10% that everyone kind of aspires to be? Do they have like a certain background, skills, characteristics, any like kind of triggers for someone that's kind of think, maybe this could be for me?
Yeah, definitely all types of background, but some similarities in their strategies, which I think prove their success. For
Mhm.
us, we're looking for people that they love the product at the end of the day too. I think that's really important. If you don't love it and you don't get behind it, you're gonna have a hard time selling it to your neighborhood at the end of the day. So we
Mhm.
want to make sure they love it, they get behind it, they believe in it. And a lot of our franchisees, their reasoning for coming into this, one is to make money, of course, and take control of their lives, but two is to make that positive impact within their community.
Mhm.
Serve these places that don't have healthy food at the end of the day. And those franchisees that are really passionate about the difference they're making, the jobs they're creating, that really proves to be very successful for them. Just it naturally emanates what they're looking to do is to grow the brand, get out there talking to people. And I
Yeah.
think the franchisees that, we give them the game plan. Here's what to talk about with people for catering. Here's the type of people to approach. The people that just go out there and do it and they're just relentless about it, marketing, that's a huge factor too. It's not rocket science of what they're doing, but you just got to get out there and do it, and it should be fun, at the end of the day.
Huh, that's really interesting. And I always kind of tell candidates, look at, the top performers, the middle performers, the bottom performers, and not just look at, their numbers, but what's important is the reasons why they got to where they got. And, does that align with kind of what you're looking to get as well? I'd be curious between those top and middle performers, how important is community engagement for a franchise owner and really being the face of the business? How important is that?
I think it's very important, whether it's the owner themselves being the face or even an employee, a manager of theirs. Someone needs to be out there talking about the brand. It's for us being the size we are, 52 stores. The reality is we're not going to throw it up in a new market and people are going to start flocking like they know exactly what's going on.
Hmm.
So you got to get the product in people's mouths. That's really kind of an inside joke of ours is here's your sales pitch. Here, try this. Give out some samples to people, let them taste it, and let the product speak for itself. And I think that outreach is just super important. There's so many like-minded businesses, the fitness centers or sports teams that need good food like this, but if
Yeah.
they don't know you're here in their community, then they're not going to make that sale. So I think just being on top of people, reaching out constantly is super important.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like even athletes don't necessarily have like the best eating habits or healthy eating habits as well. So, yeah, I see it as a huge opportunity to kind of build those relationships, especially for franchisees. Build those relationships with your local high school, the local college. Just the
Mhm.
word of mouth marketing, I think, is so powerful. Whereas, it's not just I'm making this investment and then I'm just going to let it grow. We're going to give you the systems, the operations to be successful, but it's really what you make out of it. As we were alluding to earlier, you can be very privileged, but if you don't make the most out of those opportunities, you're just going to be a middle and a bottom performer. So I think that's
Yep.
really powerful as well. And so, JD, you're talking to a lot of candidates now. You're on the phone with a lot of different people. Are there any like kind of major themes of biggest like concerns you're hearing from candidates that are, kind of deep in the pipeline thinking about franchising? Are there big like hesitations, concerns that like you're hearing from people a lot that you think may be a little bit of a misconception?
Yeah, I think the final making that final jump of
Mhm.
yes, let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's sign on the paper, let's pay the fee and let's get going can
Mhm.
be an obstacle for some people. And it's, some I talk with people a lot. I'm like, hey, if you're not anxious about this at all, then something's wrong with you. You should be anxious about this. It's, there is risk involved with it, but
Yeah.
it's so minimized compared to doing something yourself. You got to get some comfort there too. So I
Mhm.
get people that they know they want to leave their current job. They know they're sick of it, but they can get stuck in this kind of analysis paralysis of, there's always a reason to not do something, but
Yeah.
that might be why you're still in your job 30 years later. So at the end of the day, make the jump. The team's going to be here to support you and let's make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a big theme with a lot of people. They may be in corporate America and they have a bad day. They inquire about franchising. They start going through the process. And then they have one good week at work or, they get one new client or something. And then they say, I'm good in my 9 to 5. They feel like they
Yeah.
have that control. But, I think just weighing the pros and cons of both and just evaluating your life in that 3 to 5 years and what do you want your life to look like? Because although you may be in your 9 to 5, you may have had a good day, what does it overall look like? There was an initial reason why you initially reached out to the franchise, so why not at least go through the discovery process to make that educated decision on your future? So I'd be
Hmm.
curious with people going through that analysis paralysis. That's really one of the biggest things for everyone, even if they're looking at franchising or whatever it may be. Anything out of the comfort zone, analysis paralysis tends to play a role. What do you think, as someone that needs to get over the hump? What are some of like what would you say are like kind of the biggest things that someone should be looking at to evaluate whether they want to make that big investment into a franchise? Is it the CEO, the founder? Is it the franchise developer? Is it the validation? Is it the numbers? What do you think kind of like typically gets that person over the hump?
Sure. And I think having a long-term view is super important. Kind of what you alluded to. Yeah, you might have had a good week at your job, but is that how you've been feeling the past 5, 10 years at the end of the day? it's a large investment going into a franchise system, and it can be scary thinking, hey, I'm going to put out a couple $100,000 here, and I might not make that back for a year or two. That's a scary thing. But thinking forward to, hey, you're going to spend these couple years learning the system, getting this in place, and then you've paid off your initial investment. It's all up from here, and you have your whole future ahead of yourself, and you've taken control of that, of your life. I think is huge. To your question of what should they be evaluating, which pieces, I think it's all important, but
Hmm.
making sure you really have a connection with the brand and you truly believe in it, and it's something that you can see yourself, getting out to the consumer day in and day out. I think that's super important to make sure you're kind of fully bought into what the product is at the end of the day, what the brand culture is like too.
Hmm. Yeah, no, those are all really great points. If anyone's thinking about franchising, I'll just rewind that and kind of play it back. So I'd be curious in terms of like actually someone they want to get started, they make that initial investment. What does that typical timeline look like to begin operations, finding the real estate selection to, getting that first customer?
Yeah, I'd say for us, from the time someone signs a franchise agreement till their grand opening, on average, 6 to 9 months. The
Okay.
biggest variable being that real estate piece. We get our real estate team on the hunt for them right away. I've seen someone find a place in 2 weeks and sign a lease. I've seen it, take a few months depending on what you're looking for. And I think there's a lot of value in being patient, especially in the real estate phase, thinking, hey, this might have taken a month or two longer than I had hoped, but
Hmm.
end up I found it a great spot and a great location, so it's going to be worth it. Our build out's pretty quick with small stores, takes about 2 months. So then we followed up with a week of training and off to the grand opening, and they're hitting the ground running.
That's awesome. Sounds like a smooth sailing from there. What does it look like in terms of like the number of employees? I feel like that's something that could be pretty interesting as well. Is it like 10, 15, 20? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, our stores typically have anywhere from 8 to 15 people total on the payroll. At
Hmm.
any given time, typically have 2 or 3 people working. So pretty light labor count. Some of our stores, especially like the college locations, it's pretty much exclusively college students part-time.
Yeah.
So a lot of part-time workers, but don't need a ton of people.
Okay, that's super helpful, JD. I appreciate that. And I know the hour's starting to wind down and we really dove into rush bowls. I had so many other kind of outside questions as well. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate your time tremendously. I'd be kind of curious that in terms of kind of managing expectations, I feel like is such a big trend in franchising. You're making this big investment. What am I going to get out of it? What are kind of like the keys as someone's like going through that process to help them kind of manage expectations of what they're going to get?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think realizing this investment you're putting in, this time you're putting in from the get-go is for the long term. This is going to be a long-term benefit. It's not an instant gratification type of thing. Building a business, whether it's from scratch or a franchise, it's never an instant gratification. I'm sure you talk to any founder of a franchise and they're like, it was a grind. There was ups and downs, but now that the system's in place and you as a potential franchisee can step in, you know, 20 years after this started, it gives you a big leg up. But yeah, realizing this work you're putting in it's part of a bigger picture. There's a reason you wanted to, take more control of your life, switch things up. And every little step you're taking now is getting you just one step closer to that.
No, that's incredible. I love that. And as someone, they're making that investment, they're a little bit scared. The name of the podcast being Conquer the Mind, all about the mindset. What should someone's mindset be as they're kind of going through that process and kind of evaluating all these different things?
Yeah, I'd say if you're evaluating, you want to make a switch, first keep your mind open. There's so many great franchises out there to explore in every single industry at the end of the day. Find something that you already have some passion about or you've discovered you have passion about. I think do your exploring. We get a lot of people that initially they were like, there's no way I'm doing food, like no chance I'm doing it. And then they meet us, they see a store, and now they're a franchisee and they have 3 stores. So I think keep your mind open, evaluate all of it. And once you make that choice, go all in, be committed to it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think your point of the analysis paralysis, not really looking for reasons to say no, but just weighing both sides of the argument because there's no perfect scenario in either way, but it's really just what do you want your goals to look like? How much control do you want? Internal, external factors, the world's always going to have a lot of crazy things going on. So,
Mhm.
what are you personally going to do that is in your control to take those next steps in your future? So I know kind of the wellness, the health industry, it's a very dynamic industry, lots of innovations, lots of changes. Can you talk to us a little bit about do you guys have like a research department, or what are kind of like the updates going on behind the scenes to ensure you guys are like staying updated with all the new trends, health, wellness? There's just always so many new things.
Yeah, 100%. We have a research team here, development team, all that have previously managed stores personally themselves. So they've lived and breathed it. For us, we're really committed to keeping the operation simple. So not expanding into, soup, salad, sandwiches. We don't want to be a deli that does everything in a mediocre way. We want to be really targeted and be the best of the best. That being said, we like to have a diverse menu within the blended fruit bowl space and the smoothie space. So not just doing acai, not just doing pitaya, which I think are some of the top fruits you hear about in the space, but having different things like our peanut butter and jelly bowl where we grind our own peanut butter, make our own jelly, our
Mm.
yoga bowl, matcha green tea in it, and a lot of different products kind of in our back pocket that allow us to innovate, keep it fresh. We just had some of our stores adding goji berries as a topping option. So adding some new additions and mix-ins as well keeps the menu exciting.
No, that's awesome. And it's getting closer to dinner time. I'm starting to get a little hungry with all this conversation. But I know the hour's starting to wrap up. And I mean, as it's wrapping up in franchising, part of the exit strategy is, selling the business, building up this asset. Is that something you're kind of talking with candidates about? Just the ability that you're building up this asset and kind of walking them through what a potential exit strategy could look like?
Yeah, definitely conversations I have. Some people are asking about it right from the get-go. I
Yeah.
think it's something to be aware of that this is what you're building, and you never know. Yeah, say life changes 5 years down the road. Now you have this valuable asset in your possession that you can sell to someone else, let them take it over and start their journey too. And you can go on vacation, do whatever you want to do at that point. So I think that's really important to consider that you are building something that is diversifying your portfolio and setting up yourself for your future.
Hmm. No, that's really interesting. And very quickly, in terms of like the different participation models in franchising, it sounds like you want someone community facing that's really ready to ramp up a business. What does it kind of look like those first 6 to 12 months, and then maybe like 3 to 5 years down the road? What does kind of that lifestyle look like? Are they able to start traveling, kind of pursue other interests at that point, or what does it look like kind of when you start versus down the road?
Definitely. I'd say most of our franchisees are semi-absentee. They're
Okay.
not behind the counter blending bowls every day by any means, but they
Hmm.
do have a pulse on the business. That first 6 to 12 months, like you mentioned, that's when you as the owner, you want to make sure you know it better than anyone else, right? You're going
Yeah.
to be the one passing this on to your employees or manager that you might hire. As time goes on, I mean, we have some franchisees they have a manager in place, they have multiple stores, and
Hmm.
they're off doing whatever they want at this. They're totally hands off. So it's achievable. You just got to make sure you also learn it from the start. It's not, set it up and then walk away right away, but you can definitely get to there.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a great point. I think in just a big misconception in franchising where a lot of franchises say the word absentee, the investor model, but typically any franchise kind of defines it the same, but they kind of market it a little bit differently, if you will, to kind of get more kind of leads coming their way. But really what franchising is, it's really, really hard to just invest a certain amount of money and just watch it grow. If you have someone that you can trust, a general manager that you really know, and you can trust that person, it is possible. It does validate in certain brands, but it really is. You build up, you ramp up the business, and like you said, you're not the one making smoothies behind the cash
Mhm.
register. You're just making sure that the business is growing through the systems, the operations, the procedures that you guys have, so that you have a playbook and you're going to be able to implement that playbook. And I think another interesting point is that once you are a franchise owner, that's not like your end game. There's so many other things, whether you want to scale it to multi units, pursue, a property of other franchises that kind of relate to each other, or maybe you end up doing something totally different as you're watching that business continue to grow. So I think there's just so many different elements in franchising, and it's just so powerful. So, JD, I appreciate your time on the Conquer the Mind podcast. Do you have any kind of final last words of wisdom for the viewers? If, someone may be thinking about franchising, maybe thinking about, putting some inquiries out, what do you kind of tell that person that's kind of thinking, maybe I want something more for my life, but not necessarily sure whether they want to, because it is such a big time commitment. Although you're not investing any money, it's a free process to make that decision. Investing your time is a great deal for most people. They have families, they have a 9 to 5. Once the 9 to 5 ends, they want to watch Netflix and just deal with the family. So it's hard to, pursue this other business. And, it's really like a job search. You're getting interviewed, you have to prepare. So what do you tell someone that's kind of thinking about all of that?
Yeah, I'd say, take the first little step, do some initial research. Don't put pressure on yourself of, don't treat it so much like a job search where it's so urgent at the end of the day. If you just want to explore, see what's out there, have some conversations with some different brands, start getting an idea of what you might like, and just learning about franchising in general, I think is a great first step. It's a big decision for people, and I've worked with people for months at a time working through this process. So I
Mhm.
get it. From my end, I never pressure people to move more quickly. I know it's a huge decision, so
Yeah.
I'd say if you're interested in it, take the first step, have a few conversations with some people, and just see what you think about the model.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And yeah, I think, you're just trying to evaluate those different opportunities, and no decision needs to be made today. It really is just a hand holding process, step by step, to continue to get those questions answered and see if it aligns with your goals for the future. So I like to kind of just briefly wrap up the episode at the very end. So, kind of my major takeaways from the episode today are just the idea of franchising being a long term game. I think too many people are just looking at that initial average income versus their average income, but not necessarily realizing once you're a business owner, there's uncapped potential, whether it's multi-unit like we just alluded to, or other franchises. The goal is that you have control over your future and you're building up this generational asset that you can continue to grow. And we didn't even talk about, but there's so many families in franchising that gets their family involved as well. So I think that's really powerful. Just keeping an open mind, not having the analysis process, looking for reasons to say no, but having an open mind on both ways. And one of the things you did even from an early age is building these connections. And from your time with Andrew, the CEO, keeping those connections in place, because I think you can build these new connections. You can go to a networking event, make some great friends, but then you never really talk to them until like the next year at the same networking event. So I think it's really important. You never know when that opportunity will emerge, but just keep those opportunities, those relationships fresh in your mind. And I also like the old school marketing. I think there's so many new marketing techniques, but I don't know how effective all these advertisements are where you're just forcing your product down someone's throat. Like, just word of mouth marketing, flyers, something more natural to catch someone's attention. And really, as a franchise owner, being the face of the business, people in your community, if they know who you are, you're that franchise owner, your franchise is going to be a lot more successful. I can guarantee you that if people know who you are, you will be more successful. So I think, JD, this has been awesome. And I think just evaluating, it's a step-by-step process for anyone to make that educated decision. So JD, I appreciate your full hour on the Conquer the Mind podcast. I had a great time.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. A lot of good conversation. Maybe we can do it again one day. I had a great time.
Yeah, let's definitely run it back later this year. That'd be awesome.
You got it. Love it.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed, if you learned something, you think someone else could get some value out of this, like, share, comment, subscribe, help out the algorithm, help some other people learn about taking control of their future. So thank you everyone. If you made it to the end of the episode, enjoy the rest of your day.